Good evening, everyone. We'd like to get started, please, if y'all are ready. We are very appreciative for your joining us tonight. Hopefully a few more will come in, but in any event, my name is Jack Joyce. I am a city councilman here in Castle Hills in Place 4. And it's been my privilege to have been the council liaison with the committee, Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, who's put the plan together. This really represents literally thousands of hours of work over the last couple of years. We've been doing this since the fall of 2020. We came out of the Parks and Projects Commission at that time. And there's a team of 8 of us. We work very hard, and we've had the privilege of having others come in and help us, such as Bill Fitzgibbons, who's made a commentary on public art. Alan Montemayor made a commentary on sustainability suggestions and ideas. So we've had a lot of input from the community in addition to the committee itself. So what we're doing this evening is presenting you with a draft of this comprehensive plan. It's not done. We hope it's almost done, but we're going to present to you tonight some of the ideas that have come forward through the process. And we've had a survey, you may recall that from the Snowmageddon time of 2021. We had a speakers forum where we invited speakers from the outside to educate us on different topics, such as zoning, aging in place, things like that, things related to comprehensive master planning. And then we had workshops where we, with the help of LPA architects, that represents their work on that wall over there, they help us define our priorities. And with their help, we were able to move toward that step. That was December of last year. And so the committee has spent this year refining those ideas, putting them together, and coming up with a document which will be released as a draft form probably a week from tomorrow. That's the goal. That's the point at which we'll present to council. Tonight is our presentation to the public. On the 10th, which is Saturday, we'll present to the Parks and Projects Commission, which, as I mentioned, gave us our start. And then the 13th, a week from tomorrow, we'll present to council. So we asked for your participation a little bit later. It's probably best, we have about 34 slides or so to get through. So it's probably best, we're going to go through it pretty quick. And so if you hold your questions to the end, that might be best. Unless you don't hear something or don't understand something, by all means, please interrupt us. But if I may, I'd like to invite, or rather introduce the committee, those of us that have made it tonight. Amy McClinn is our chair, and she has graciously guided us for a couple of years now. And Moretta Scott is the vice chair, and Moretta has helped Amy push the group along. But anyway, really and truly, we're going to get the ideas out tonight, and it's your opportunity to tell us what you think. So if with that as an introduction, may I please introduce Amy and ask her to get us going on the presentation. Okay, this thing works. The right side is forward. The left side is back. There's no pointer.
All right.
Oh, do you need this?
No, I'll get one. All right. Thank you guys for coming. Hopefully we have taken the input from the last 2 years and honed it down based on the input that we've gotten. We've spent hours and hours debating the minutia of some of these issues. This presentation today, we are going to explain a little bit to you about what comprehensive plan is, review our mission, our goals, to review of the plan process, priorities, output, and a little bit of a summarization. So a comprehensive plan is a long-range plan that's intended to direct the growth and physical development of a community over a multi-decade period of time. So we're looking short-term and we're looking long-term. Our goal with this document is to create something that we can amend as times change and technologies change, so that no group of citizens ever has to go back and spend thousands of hours starting from scratch again. So hopefully this becomes a living document, and over time, council will adopt a process for being able to change it without going back to square one. That'd be a really good dream. Major components, we talk about land use, infrastructure, transportation, parks and green spaces, and our community facilities. These were all things that when I served on council were issues the community has told us that they are things they're concerned about. And so the comp plan will include all of those and many more things. All right, so our committee, as Jack said, is a subcommittee of the Parks and Projects Committee. We were formed in late 2020, and we started by having Zoom meetings every 2 weeks, and we would sit and talk about different things. And at the beginning, we were really scattered, and as the time went on, we became very focused. Everyone on the committee coming to the table with a different set of professional experiences and personal experiences. So we had a really good group. I am the chair. Moretta Scott is my co-chair. Barry Middleman is on our committee. Agdel Rivera, Ray Schultz is on our committee. He was also at the beginning our Parks and Projects liaison. Skip McCormick is also on our committee. Bruce Smiley Califf and Jack Joyce, as he said, is our council liaison. So we had a really good group of people with varying experiences of serving our city in various capacities. Bruce Smiley was on council and also served as mayor. So we had a breadth of experience with the city and professionally. So we would like to thank the mayor and city council for actually recognizing that this is a priority to plan for the future. I know from my point when I served on council that there were many times I wish I'd had a document like this to help me know what the citizens wanted, the citizens at large versus just the citizens that came to speak on a particular issue. So we're hoping that this will be a guiding document for council, for the Parks and Projects Commission, for the Board of Adjustments, for the Zoning Commission, for ARC, for the Architectural Review Committee, that it'll be a document they can look at and help them make decisions. We had speakers forums. We had about 200 people participate in various, some people came to everyone, some people came to one or two. And this slide just shows all the various ways that we gathered input, from surveys to meetings with city staff to see what their comments were too. So very early on, we spent several meetings deciding what our mission was. And so the mission that we adopted was: the purpose of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee is to, with input from Castle Hills citizens, businesses, city staff, and council, produce a roadmap for economic development and the care, maintenance, and growth of our city's infrastructure, facilities, green spaces, and services for the future. At the time that we drafted that, we did not realize that city services are one of the reasons why Castle Hills was incorporated in the first place. That the citizens, or the people that came together and thought we should be our own community, really valued and thought that they could provide services to the citizens that would be better than San Antonio. And so that was a big part of us becoming a city. So it's interesting that we included that in our mission statement, because I know we all appreciate our fire department, our police department, our sanitation department, which is public works, and all the things that they do, and everyone that works in the city offices that process passports or work for the court. The overarching goal is to create a more livable, walkable, healthy, vital, and prosperous city for all of the stakeholders, including the citizens, the staff, visitors, and businesses. We recognized from the beginning that it's not just the citizens, we have business citizens, and that we need to be thinking about the staff as well. All right, so this is another recap of the process. We started with a written survey. We had the speakers forums, we had idea workshops, we developed and presented priorities, and then we developed recommendations, and we've started drafting. It's still pretty rough, but it is coming along. And we will be presenting the draft to council next week. We are hoping that the final plan will be presented to council in January, and that we will go into the new year with a comprehensive plan in place. This is one of the tools that the city needs to have in place, along with the other documents it has, like strategic plans or CIPs. Why am I blanking on what C stands for in CIP? Ryan, why am I blanking on that? Yeah, capital improvement plan. All right, for some reason I just blanked. All right, so this is a roadmap. We're looking 10 to 15 years out. We are making approximately 60 recommendations across 8 broad topics. Although I think in some of the narrative, there are a lot more recommendations that can be gleaned from the document that exists right now. We are hoping that it will be attractive. We've put a lot of graphics in it. We've got some really old pictures from the city when it was started. Got a really cool old police car picture that I just plugged into it today. That was really neat. It reminds me of old black and white TV shows. And we will be sharing the document. It will be a link on the website once it's approved, and we have an extensive appendix that will be attached, and hopefully eventually we will have live links to where you could go into the appendix and pull up the walkability study that was done, or pull up the capital improvement plan, so that you can specifically drill down into what you're interested in and maybe not have to read through the whole thing. All right, so one very cool thing that this document will be the first thing to really ever put out officially is that we have talked long and hard about how to discuss the needs and wants of different parts of the city. So we've decided that we have divided the city into 2 parts, the north area and the south area. That's the North Loop and the South Loop, or Solo and Solo. Each part of the city has 3 distinct neighborhoods. If you start looking at the characters of houses and the way they were developed, you have the Southern Cone, which is the area that's kind of south of Antler towards the tip that's down by Nimitz Middle School. That's SoCo, or the Southern Cone. You have the area that is to the one side of Honeysuckle, that is the Terrace. And those are smaller lots. I believe that there was a parade of homes there that we have a brochure from that's going to be in the comp plan. So there's the Terrace. The Estates is the area that is Cass Hills up to 410, Blanco over to Honeysuckle. Larger homes the architecture is very varied in that area, but the style is, houses are farther apart. If you get to the Northern Loop, you have Midtown, which is this area where City Hall is located. It's military over to West Avenue. And so West Avenue kind of forms the northern arch. You can see the purple section is Midtown. The edge is the area over between Lock Hill, Selma, and Northwest Military. And then west of West, or WOW, is the area that's all to the west side of West Avenue. And that area is really characterized by very large tracts of land. McGimpsey is on the north side of it. And then you have everything from Aggie Park and the Castle Hills the church that's right there, and then Antonian. And then you've got all the houses along Vauxhall. So that area has got its own character and also has a rural residential designation. So this is very exciting. We're hoping that it creates identity in the different areas and will help council and the other committees and commissions pinpoint what the needs of those areas are. Generally speaking, they all have big arching trees over the streets. So we all have some things in common, but the needs of the Estates are very different than the needs of WOW, or the Edge, which has a lot of mid-century modern houses over in that part of town. So this is a good way for us to characterize and categorize how we can make sure every part of town gets amenities. You know, if we're talking green spaces, we can make sure that people in the different areas or neighborhoods of town actually have access to green spaces, because right now we have the Commons, and that's in Midtown. So everyone else is sort of out of luck at this point because there's not a green space. So there's some discussion of that later. Our speakers forums, we had all kinds of topics. We talked about crime and security, because we know that that is a big issue in some parts of town. We had discussions of green spaces. We have a lot of walkers. So we had lots of conversation about transportation and mobility, and how we have walkers and bikers and vehicles on the road at the same time. We had zoning discussions, and zoning is one of those topics that is difficult to understand or appreciate how important it is, but we had lots of discussion on zoning, education in schools, economic development, residential real estate opportunities, commercial real estate opportunities, live workspaces, which is, we'll talk a little bit later about, infrastructure, aging in place, and sustainability. And all of the speakers were very engaging, and it was really exciting to hear the things they had to say. We've incorporated a lot of the ideas that were brought forth in those speakers forums into the comprehensive plan. So what we discovered over the period of this process is that our residents, our citizens want improved pedestrian mobility, whether that means, oh, did I go forward? Sorry. There we go. Improved pedestrian mobility, whether that means sidewalks, whether that means streetlights. We don't necessarily know what that means. We haven't made those particular recommendations, honed down specifically, but we know that this is a priority for our residents. Improved bikeway infrastructure. Cars don't like bicycles all the time. And, so we've got to figure out a way to make it safer for everyone to bike around the neighborhood. Improved neighborhood connection. Creating new green spaces. We were able to locate several areas in town that are easements that are potential areas where we could have either a linear park or a dog park or some small use where it would be a destination in a particular neighborhood for you to go and sit and have some quiet time or go walk your dog and have some place to go rather than just back and forth up and down the streets. We had discussion about where we could have a city center. We have City Hall right here with the fire department, the police department, public works, but where would be a city center that would be a destination? Could we make Northwest Military something like that by improving landscaping, or, how could that be done? We studied land use changes as at major highways and at street edges as a way to create more efficient buffers to San Antonio and to the highways and the busy streets that we have. And you'll see that in some of the graphics in the presentation. We've taken great liberties with identifying areas of town that would be good for multiple zoning, like a flex zoning concept where you would have a choice of a different way to use the property to try to create sound buffers or safety buffers between highways or neighboring San Antonio. That was my last page, right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Scott. Are you doing the next one?
I'll do the description.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So with respect to infrastructure, certainly there's a lot to think about. I think one of the things with reference to this building is to maintain it as a cool or warm space if we ever have utility outages, as we did, a year or so ago, just to make sure that that is done well. And then another thing we'll talk about is what we're going to recommend is studying the feasibility of either renovating this building or replacing it. As an architect, I can tell you that it has some serious dysfunction going on in here, and there's a lot of improvement that could be made. So do we renovate this thing, or do we build something new? That's something that we'll grapple with. So we recommend that be studied. Amy mentioned the bike lanes and the walk. Mention at this point, they be safe. We heard a lot of comments during the workshops about the bike lanes and the pedestrian spaces, especially these. For example, if you walk on that sidewalk that goes up the east side of Military, you think you're taking your life into your hands with those people running by at 45 miles an hour. So the group seemed to think that that was not a safe situation and would advocate for maybe some sort of separation between the street and the highway. And then studying streetlight levels as well, in reference to both pedestrian and bike lanes. And we'll get into a few graphics of this in a moment. But those are the more short-term suggestions. But on the longer term, we'll continue to support the repair of our streets and drainage. We got to keep doing that. I know our group was so happy that the certificates of obligation passed this past election day, and the council already getting to work on it. But one of the things in all of the costs we're bearing for these drainage projects is it's really not fair to Castle Hills because it's San Antonio's water, essentially, especially on the Lock Hill Selma side that's coming across and going down Carrollwood and some of those neighboring streets. So although we're taking care of it ourselves, our city manager has great relationship with both the city of San Antonio and Bear County. And he's been working on it actually already, but we really need to work harder to have them share the costs of these things and future things as well. One of the things we'd like to do is have a study of the alleys done, because I know at this point it's kind of catch as catch can, and there's have been some pretty massive potholes in the alleys. I've seen them and experienced them myself. And so I think we need to formalize the analysis and maintenance of those alleys a little bit more seriously. And okay, so what I'm going to do is fast forward a little bit. Did I go? We'll talk about the streetlights, but I want to, okay, these are the two things I like to talk about. I'm sorry I don't have a pointer, but the diagram on the left represents potential walking paths for Castle Hills. And the diagram on the right suggests bike lanes for Castle Hills. And you can see they're not terribly different, actually. But what they're trying to do, sorry, I don't have a pointer, but on the walking diagram, if you can see at the southern end where Antler comes across and intersects Honeysuckle, the idea is to help make that connection between the north and the south. So Antler intersects Honeysuckle, it goes up all the way under 410 and connects into Lemonwood, and then it makes its way over to Northwest Military and some of the other major things. We want to make sure that the schools are all taken care of. The schools are all addressed either by walking or by biking. Some of the major shopping centers, HEB. And importantly, we really would like to make sure that we connect to Hardberger Park. Because if we do that, we can connect into San Antonio's 100 or so miles of trails that they have. And so that would be a tremendous benefit, we think, but also perhaps attract some of the folks at Hardberger Park to come down into Castle Hills. If we can get a decent connection and maybe support our businesses in a better fashion. So that's the idea there. Let me go back to the streetlights. And I have to compliment one of the members of our committee is Ray Schultz. And Ray, I can't tell you how many hours he spent he developed these little sketches. And he spent, I don't know, maybe 10 phone calls with CPS to finally get the diagram of streetlights that is overlaid on this drawing here. So kudos to Ray. But anyway, CPS will do a study for us of the major streets, but not our little inner Castle Hill streets. So what Ray has done is look at that and made some suggestions where we might need new street lamps or even street lights altogether. So that's what this diagram suggests. And then the idea of connection that I mentioned a moment ago, on the left is a diagram of Honeysuckle. And we're going to recommend that we work on that intersection to the point where it becomes a very special place. Perhaps the big steel girders could be painted a cool color. Perhaps we could introduce some public art to that, perhaps some light, special light or something under that highway, as Mr. Fitzgibbons has designed at Commerce Street and some of the other streets in downtown San Antonio. But pedestrian lanes, bike lanes, just try to activate it and provide a really good, attractive connection between the north and the south. We think Honeysuckle is probably the one that has the most potential. Almost for obvious reasons, I would think that West Avenue and Blanco would probably be somewhat more problematic. Blanco's an animal. But anyway, that little drawing on the right is recommended by a planner by the name of Bill, who is sitting in the back. Maybe I got the wrong, I don't know. But anyway, this represents a pedestrian bridge in Ireland that goes over that body of water. And we're just wondering, I mean, this is long term. This is like Castle Hill's 100th anniversary or something like that. But is there a way to get some beautiful pedestrian bridge that's attractive and would connect Castle Hills to that shopping center over there to North Park? Food for thought. Okay. Next topic is, what's going on here? Okay, we seem to have lost the slide there, but I'd like to say a word, just if I may, about economic development. I must have passed it. I apologize. But anyway, we believe that economic development is really important to the future of our city. Economic development is something that can ultimately, through supporting businesses, provide us with a higher quality of life. Because what happens is when we support the businesses and they make a little more money, they pay a little more tax, or the property goes up in value, it's really a good thing for the city. So if we had more money, imagine if we could pay for all of these street repairs and drainage repairs with our own money. That's the kind of thing we think, in addition to amenities like those we're proposing, that economic development could help with. Council has actually already established an economic development committee. We're in the process right now of putting together the criteria for them. And hopefully in the next month or two, we'll have a sitting committee on economic development. Okay. Okay, we covered transportation pretty well, streets pretty well. Okay. Then to city facilities. About this building, I made some kind of snarky remarks about this building, but they're actually sincerely held. Because if you think about some of the functional problems with this building, the first thing is, well, okay, somebody who doesn't know Castle Hills comes up to the front door, they park in the parking lot, they want to go see Nora in the finance department, or Ryan in the administration, the city manager. How do they get to him from the front? They can't. They have to go through the lobby and out the back door and around here and into this door here, or come through this room here. And if court's going on, that's impossible. So that's not a really good way to do things. We think that this room here is way too big for its size. Some of the other areas like Castle Hills and Terrell Hills, who have built city halls recently, are building these council chambers at a fraction of this size. We think that needs to be looked at. And we need to develop the commons as well to change topics away from this building. We'll look at a diagram in a moment. But what we heard a lot in the workshops was the need for more community spaces. And that's really where we're weak. Think about that community room that we have on the other side of the building. And, in order to get to it, we hold our executive sessions for council in that room. So to get to that room from here, we have to walk through the police department. And it would seem, and I believe it was the mayor's idea, we'll show you a plan in a moment, that a better location for that room would be on this end of the building, near the commons. So we could put some restrooms there and have a symbiosis between those spaces. So, okay. And here's a diagram of what we might call a city center. The architects on the left, you'll see this is LPA. They have suggested as part of this presentation that maybe we rethink this building. They had proposed a new building that, that may be pie in the sky at this point for us. But in any event, I thought, introduced some pretty interesting ideas. You may notice that the right-hand edge of the building is pretty much right up on the commons. What they've done is taken that driving lane and put it on the other side. So all the parking is on the left-hand side of the building. And whether or not it's apportioned properly, we need to look into. But in any event, they've proposed that the building on top, building 3, be the police department, and that be completely separate from the administration and the other areas of the building. And number 1 there, which is next to the commons, would be the community facilities with our big community room. Maybe we have some art spaces. Maybe we have some craft spaces, display spaces, things like that, where the community can really participate and show off their wares. And we had an interesting discussion about the commons. The Parks and Projects Commission is working on making recommendations for playground equipment and shade structures to them, where Ryan is helping us kind of develop costs for that. And hopefully in the next month or so, there'll be an actual recommendation. But this diagram of the commons that you see is fairly close to what the thinking is right now. And up in the upper right-hand corner, you see kind of a basketball court shown. That is actually city property as well, on top of the public works space. And that could be maybe sport courts or perhaps some kind of a, I don't know, just a relaxing plaza. Who knows what it might be, but it has great potential. It's proposed to be connected to the commons with a type of boardwalk or some sort of solid connection that gives a great connection between the two. And this is a plan that Barry Middleton and myself worked on this building. It's a proposal for renovation, and it encaptures many of the ideas I mentioned a moment ago. Well, you'll notice the green space on the right-hand side, that's the community room and community spaces with restrooms right there in the pink on top near the commons. The orangey color, the administrative spaces, the city manager and his team. And the purple, the light purple is this space, the council chambers. And then across the lobby, the community space is shown as lobby, and the blue is the police department. And we've reshuffled some of the spaces in the police department to make it more efficient for them. Unfortunately, the detectives, there's not enough room for them downstairs, so they'll still be upstairs. But at least we get the gym and the lockers upstairs, so we got more space for people downstairs. And Barry has we had some private money help us with this stuff, but Barry has worked with a fellow he used to work with who's very good with graphics, and suggested what the facade of this building might look like. I mean, if we maybe think about stuccoing at some of it, highlighting the columns. He has proposed that we think about maybe a kind of a dormer type situation on the second floor, so we can get some light into this area here and into potential offices on the second floor. And then he's, this is kind of a conservative thing. The peak is still there. We were a little shy about suggesting that going away because that's probably another, whatever number of dollars. But in any event, he proposed kind of a metal screen with the word City of Castle Hills on it, kind of differentiate it and make it look a little bit more contemporary. But anyway, the idea is to try to move away from the former church look that we have now. So okay, Moretti, you want to take it over for now at this point? Okay, thank you.
Hi, once again, I'm Moretta Scott, and I'm excited to be taking over right here with recommendations for public art because art is near and dear to my heart and our family. I have to thank Bill Fitzgibbons, who I got to meet this evening, for putting together the section about public art, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much that really gives a city a homey feeling and connects people throughout spaces. So as far as public art goes, really consider the commons potentially for a sculpture park or public art programs. If we are looking at moving our community center, which right now is way over there, into this area, some of the ideas that we talked about, in addition to Mr. Fitzgibbon's ideas, was the fact that we need display areas for art within the community center where we're meeting and gathering. And we threw around a lot of different ideas about school kids being able to display their art, potentially having some artists in residence sponsored by the city to display their art in various forms. And so if you look at the slide here developed by Mr. Fitzgibbons, it's establishing a public art program. So it adds to the growth of citizens' pride and a renewed sense of place. Yes, I agree with considering public art sites at local businesses, at local schools, maybe here in our community center, and establishing a public arts master plan. And I love that idea because art really does bring a community together, particularly as it comes up and goes down. You always want to see what's happening around the city art wise. Let's see, that sums up the art part. And let's see. Okay, so the next section was recommendations and the study of land use changes at major highways and street edges. A few minutes ago, Ms. McClin was talking about how we really looked at creating buffers between the city of Castle Hills and San Antonio and the major freeways and highways that cut through our city. So the study looked at possibly having mixed use or multifamily use along Jackson Keller on Northwest Military, or Moss Drive around Carrollwood. If you look up north and down Northwest Military right now, you may have noticed we have a new restaurant. It's not new to Castle Hills, it's just new to location. Bill is there. We have Clementine. Northwest Military really has a lot of potential as being a area to draw citizens in and along Castle Hills. So the study also wanted to look at flex use on the east side of West Avenue. As you come along West Avenue on that east side, we already have a mix of commercial, mixed use, office, multifamily, and other previous commercial properties. Do we want to expand those into commercial properties along 410 on the south, West Avenue on the west, Adobe on the north, and Honeysuckle on the east? Do we want to consider maybe changing those into flex use, where you have a property that if you purchase it, you may have multiple opportunities for development? The study would include impact on traffic, noise pollution is a big one. Those buffers, it would be nice to protect the homes from the sounds, property values, utilities, roads, public transportation, and just the financial feasibility of maybe some of these changes. And indicate a beautification program to include resurfacing existing buildings, parking lot resurfacing, in addition to landscaping and refreshing signage. Just make the city look fresher, newer, and more relevant to today. So, so if you go on to our map here, we've identified some of these areas. That's existing, sorry, it's existing land use. Here we go. Okay, so these are our proposed areas that I was talking about. So let's look at the southern part of the city. Right now, if you look at the tip down there, I wish we could get that off. The green areas down there are flex use, where maybe it's either commercial, mixed use, office, multifamily, down at the bottom of the southern cone. If you look along the edge there that goes up towards 410, you also have mixed use and multifamily, and that area right now already has a lot of multifamily use. If you look at the yellow gold area that kind of arcs there across this, the southern part of the city right there at 410, we've identified that as a very great potential for multifamily, particular maybe multi-story condo sort of things, sort of development, just ideas. We're throwing ideas out there. None of this is like actually, these are just possibilities, but that would create a better buffer, sound buffer between 410 and some of the single family homes there in Midtown and the estates. So as we move north, once again, north of 410, you have a lot of those green areas, which are flex use areas, potentially flex use areas with commercial, mixed use, office, multifamily. But you see how we've developed potential areas that create buffers around each section of town. And those are something that we would like to go ahead and study and look at as proposed uses of our land, better uses to give those buffers to the people in their, as the city develops. So those were some tossed out proposed land uses. And that idea was tossed around quite a bit for the flex use. Seemed quite popular. So one of the recommendations, like I said before, was to use Northwest Military Highway as a main street. Most cities have a main drag or a street that when you enter into a city, that's where you enter. So there were a lot of people discussing a Northwest Military as Main Street for Castle Hills. So as you enter off of 410 and you head up Northwest Military, some of the short things would be a study of addition of multifamily housing, such as townhomes or live work facilities. As we know now, a lot of people are working from home. It's very popular. People are not wanting to go back into the office. They would like to have a nice live work facility or even mixed use facilities along Northwest Military. And that gives a buffer between commercial and those residential areas along there. And then in the long term, we want to continue to discuss to provide shaded pedestrian paths on the east side and a right of way of Northwest Military, and to slim down the traffic lanes to add a safe bike path on Northwest Military, because right now there's no way I would ride my bicycle up and down Northwest Military. But long term, if we could look at creating some of those ideas, there's a great graphic, but I don't see it in here, about how Northwest Military could be altered just a little bit to fix, make it more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. Okay. And here's the next one, which is also a favorite of mine. Okay. Oh. After art, which is near to my heart, green spaces. That is one thing when I moved to Castle Hills before I even had a family, was green spaces, looking for places to once again develop community. So in the short term, we've identified, and the map is a little bit hard to see up here, but there's also, if you look at some of the that LPA developed, in the short term, to explore linear park opportunities, there are a lot of easements around the city that are belong to the city that can be developed into additional green spaces, to explore sharing opportunities with Castle Hills Elementary. Right now, I hope most people are beginning to realize that once the school is no longer in session in the evening, you can take the path down the back behind the school. There's a beautiful gate. They have a walking path back there. They have exercise equipment and they have playgrounds available as long as school isn't in session. So those sharing opportunities are there. And if we can expand them, that would be wonderful. And also to enhance the commons. And we already saw a display of one of the many proposed ideas for the commons, and whatever's recommended by the Parks and Project Commission. And that goes back into public art and just developing the commons once again to bring people together within the city. And then long-term goals, as Jack mentioned, would be developing walking paths that connect to the San Antonio Trail system, and then provide one green space for each neighborhood and then connect them together, because connecting the neighborhoods is something that everyone seems to want to do. So let's give you a few examples here. Okay, on the left-hand side, you have external examples of green spaces. The top one, and okay, goes into, and then opportunities for Castle Hills Elementary on the right-hand side, which shows our current commons and how close we are to the pedestrian path to walk across to Castle Hills. So you have the green schoolyards, particularly for play and community growth. And then within this area, there is the opportunity for green infrastructure opportunities, such as planting more trees, green schoolyards, and bioswale. So if you look at this whole area view here of our current city structure and where the elementary school is and their structure, it shows a lot of opportunities to talk about furthering our green infrastructure. As we continue to talk about green spaces, we need to look at our urban creeks and our stream restoration. These are some examples from other cities where they have, where they've looked at before. On the right, San Pedro Creek before, and then once they cleaned it up and renovated a bit, look at that underneath. That's the San Pedro Creek Cultural Park. So we need to go back here in Castle Hills and look at some of our easements and see if it's possible to clean them out and make them in from overgrown easements into walkability pathways, linear parks, dog parks, play areas for the children in the area. So this just shows a couple of examples of where they've taken something that's not very pretty and they've cleaned it up and made it into a park area. And there are quite a few areas here in Castle Hills that we can look at that. So The next section we're getting into is sustainability. And I think I'm going to pass that back over to Jack if you're ready to talk about sustainability.
Thanks, Marta. A gentleman by the name of Alan Montemayor, who is a Castle Hills resident, wrote a really nice brief on sustainability ideas for us. And these are just a few of the ideas that we thought we'd review, because a lot of them cost nothing and could save us some money. For example, have CPS conduct a free energy audit of city facilities on the short term here. Have SAWS conduct an irrigation assessment. Conduct a study of potential installation of solar panels on the fire station, because it's oriented correctly. Consider changes to the roadway system to make them more pedestrian and bike friendly. Of course, we've been talking about that. Consider replacing turf and plants that require water. Examine city ordinances to encourage the use of native plants, wildflowers, and the creation of wildlife habitat. And then finally, on the short term, encourage residents to make use of water conservation rebates offered by SAWS to install water-saving native plants. Makes a lot of sense. And then in the long term, he thought that maybe we might look at this building as a potential, put a new roof on it, and maybe it's potential solar panels then at some point in the future. Consider a rainwater harvesting system for the fire station. And then consider dark sky initiatives that benefit, all of us, including wildlife. The dark sky, of course, meaning you have your large lamps that do not pollute others around you. And then there's a few other recommendations. I think Moretta already talked about beautification, so I probably don't have to go into that in great detail, but there's some areas in and around Castle Hills that could use a little bit of sprucing up. And so we propose that be something that be advocated for the plan. Maybe it's just some landscaping in a parking lot. Maybe it's sprucing up signage, who knows, but just some simple things that could really go a long way to sprucing up our community. And another thing we'd like to recommend, and this probably would something that would befall the Economic Development Committee, is that recommend that we would develop policies and incentives to attract high-end or destination retailers here in Castle Hills. At one time, when Castle Hills was first built in the early 50s, it was the gem of San Antonio, and a lot of the retail was attractive to all of San Antonio. And we have that to some degree now, especially I think with some of the fine restaurants we have, and we need to build on that. But I think the idea is to try to go back to that position we held some time ago. And then again, the last idea is to attract more fine dining to Castle Hills. And so that's it in terms of the recommendations. In terms of implementation, what we'd like to, we have our own ideas about what the priorities should be, but we're glad to see you all here tonight because we want to invite you to tell us about the priorities. So that's the first thing. But in terms of getting it done, I had the privilege of sitting on the Economic Development Committee back in 2005, 2006, whenever that was. And they had a beautiful study done by the graduate students in urban design at A&M. Beautiful study. Analyzed the city beautifully, made some wonderful recommendations. It sat on a shelf. And we never heard from it since. We don't want this to happen this time. What we're trying to do is work a process with Mr. Rapley. He's already introduced our city to the idea of a capital improvement plan. So ultimately, we would like to see those ideas that you all believe are the highest priorities become part of the CIP, the capital improvement plan, so they don't get lost. Funding, of course, is a question, and we don't have the answer to that, but there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, there's private funding, grants. One of the things the Economic Development Committee will be charged with is finding grants for our city. Perhaps certificates of obligation is one idea, probably not the ideal, but there's a lot of different ways to fund these kinds of ideas. even best would be if we had the money ourselves and didn't have to borrow it. But anyway, that's just a quick word about implementation. And so, Scott, do you know how to get rid of that black bar on this thing? So folks, what we'd like you to do is just take a moment and look at these priorities. We reviewed them early on, but just take a look at that and think about, in your mind, what are the top 3 priorities? And then Amy's got a little piece of paper here with them all written down and a pen. And if you would please come up and just next to each idea, write where you think, whether that's 1, 2, or 3 or nothing, just to indicate your 1, 2, and 3 on this piece of paper. So please take a moment and think about that. And at that point, once that's completed, we'll invite a discussion. Would anybody, maybe we ought to just, yeah. Why don't we, yes, ma'am. Yeah, let's talk about the priorities and if there's any comments and questions about the presentation. Yes. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I think we can hear you. Do you have that other mic? Uh-huh. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions or observations or? Go ahead.
So we do, but some of the grants like Texas Parks and Wildlife, they're matching grants. For some of the walkability grants, they can be up to 75%. So if we strategically went after grants to where our input is 25% of the full cost, it makes our money go farther. So some of the grant money is matching money. Some of it is, anywhere between 50%, matching 50%. So there is savings and that's definitely, one of the pots of money that we can pull from. But if we used it strategically, it could potentially do more by going after some of the grants. So that has been studied over and over. And unfortunately, the way the deed restrictions are written for it, any public use of McGimpsey is going to be challenging. Maybe not always impossible, but the deed restrictions, from what I understand, it can only be used by the Scouts, and it's very limited for anything beyond that. Right. So rest assured that nobody's forgetting about McGimpsey. It's got a lot of challenges. So that would be one of those long-term, consider that a long-term possibility. If it's a possibility, join Scouts and you can camp there. No. Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir. Thank you. It has been a labor of love. Eh, It's been a labor of love for everyone on the committee. Who wants to be the first person to share their priorities? Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, ma'am. There has been a lot of discussion of branding. The city having one logo, you know, you look around and we've got the trees and we've got the castle and we've got all kinds of different things. So there has been a lot of discussion of branding and creating identity. The street lights are definitely something. I think recently, Mr. Rapley has spent a lot of time in trying to make all of our street signs at least say City of Castle Hills. So when you come into the city, we're starting to brand a little bit that way. All of what you're saying, we had hours of discussion about all the little ways that we could show people by the street lights changing or the street signs changing that they've entered Castle Hills. I personally, when I drive up 35 and I see some of the overpasses and how they've been done, especially up, oh, there's a city towards like, well, Kyle's is good, but there's one that's got this gorgeous wrought iron work on it. I'm like, why don't we have that? But so there has been, I am glad to hear that that those sorts of things are that you would recognize those.
I was just going to say there are some images that have been created that will be in the actual plan that shows Northwest Military as a little bit more usable potentially as a main street. I was looking to see if any of those images had gotten up on the wall yet, and they're not, but they will be included in the actual comp plan itself. And those should be in the draft that's coming out really shortly. So I was trying to see if I could find a copy of those, but they weren't with the pedestrian and the crossings and the bike lanes that we had talked about with TxDOT. Does it cycle around? Now it's kind of stuck. It does back on the cover. But I can't get back to the cover.
Thank you, Scott. By the way, folks, this young man is our city intern, Scott Figueroa. He is the one putting the document together. He spent the last few weeks, well, last 2 months, I would say, as part of his time putting this document together. So when it's finally published next week in draft form, we hope you'll appreciate it and maybe thank Scott. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes, if you look at this image, and this is very similar to, we met with TxDOT during part of our process to see what they would be willing to do, because Northwest Military is actually it's a state highway, correct?
Federal.
Yes, TxDOT. So it's a state highway, but so we met with them concerning Northwest Military, and they were very willing to visit with us and talk with us. And what you see here in this image was some of the ideas that they pulled and some of those images that I wanted to say to be sure to look for in the comprehensive plan when it is issued, because they were willing to work with us on making Northwest Military more walkable, more bikeable, more of a main street type area. So if you look at this image, it shows how there's plenty of landscaping dividing the different areas from one another. So so be sure to be on the lookout for that. I see a lot of familiar faces out here, but anyone else have any comments? Priorities? Thank you. Yeah, living document is what that living document. Oh, no, exactly what you're saying. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Create that living document.
Plus being for sale, art for sale, that serve as, this sort of catalyst to in that push for development.
That's an excellent question. And that's something that we kind of have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, that would be something we would look to the economic
Development.
committee to get to know all those landowners, to get to know the business owners, get in touch with them. And really, the nuts and bolts of economic development, retaining, expanding, and helping businesses grow. And so that's the idea. So if there is opportunity for somebody selling a piece of land, if we've heard from somebody perhaps who wants to put a new building in the business field, or if we're in touch with the folks who own the offices and the retail centers, maybe we can help somebody who wants to expand find a new place in Castle Hills rather than go somewhere else. And that's kind of the idea.
Well, and I'm excited about the Economic Development Committee because what Moretta and I found when we would go to the Texas Municipal League trainings is that there were vendors that their job was to find businesses, places to expand to. And we would explain to them where we were and their eyes would light up. You're located where? And we're like, in the middle of San Antonio. So I think that
All we had to say was Castle Hills, and they said, you represent Castle Hills, you're from Castle Hills. They're very interested in.
just
they're
the
very interested
location.
In the location, and they said, depending on what the city wants, they can help place retail, commercial type businesses within your city. So they connect with the name brand vendors. I'm just gonna, these are not necessarily ones, but they connect with like the Trader Joe's, the natural grocers, those sort of businesses, and they help them find new locations. So there's vendors that want to connect their businesses that they represent with cities who might want their businesses to come into them. So that does exist. And through our TML training, we learned that there are these possibilities of connection. But once again, that goes to the Economic Development Committee and through our city manager.
And if I could just ramble on that point for a second, one of the things that I learned at TML last year was that there's a number of companies who do retail analysis. And through the looking at cell phone data, they can tell where folks come who shop at certain places in our city. And I was shown one of the quarry, analysis of the quarry. And guess where a lot of the shoppers who go to the quarry are from? Right here. So why don't we have those kind of businesses here in Castle Hills? Anyway, these are the kind of analyses that we can do and help us move hopefully in the right direction.
Yeah, these are all good questions, and that's why we're having this forum to ask them, and that if you have them, to ask them or make comments or suggestions. Yes, Ms. Nguyen.
Well, I think all I mean by city center is just the city hall campus.
Well, that would be like, we have the community room. So really by city center, we're meaning it's where the fire department, the police department, city hall, it's where like the heart, what makes the city work. Not infrastructure, because infrastructure's the roads, the
Everywhere.
drainage, the streetlights, all that. It's by city. That would be part of it, like a community room or like meeting room or
It's a community meeting area in the city center would be ideal, because it's where people come. Right now, I drove by last night, we were having the lighting of the lights last night. That obviously the Commons is a community center. It's where people come to get together, to get to know their neighbors and to have an activity, whether it's a movie night or it's a concert or it's a lighting for the holidays, that sort of thing. So yes, so a community center is the center of the city where people come to gather. So the community room over there, it has its uses, but one of the suggestions, it has limited uses, but one of the suggestions, particularly by LPA architects, and that's their job, was to potentially move it to this side of the building if we did decide to make some changes like what Mr. Middleman and Mr. Joyce did in looking at the plans for the use of this building. Because I got real excited at seeing what some of the other cities did where their community areas, their community rooms opened up into their green spaces. So if you could imagine moving that community room, and this is just kind of right now pie in the sky, to this side of the building where it opened up into the commons, I can envision my daughter's Sweet 16 and stringing fairy lights from inside the building and renting the building for a party or for a wedding anniversary, 25th wedding anniversary, 50th wedding anniversary, Sweet 16. And the city's making money off of renting out the space, but the space has to be usable. Right now, I'm not going to rent out the community room for a Sweet 16 party for my daughter. But if we make the spaces more usable and community friendly and give them a lot of opportunities for use, different uses within the same space, then that just gives the city a lot more opportunities within that space.
So I know from looking at Leon Valleys that I think they have a library organization. Cities decide that they want one. We've looked into it. We had a lot of books donated and it was just not feasible because it's so much to store and house and operate. So for us, we looked at it and it just wasn't a feasibility. It wasn't an amenity that was going to be feasible for our community to support. Yeah. No. Okay. So here's the dirty secret. Everything has to be maintained forever, right? So our streets, we're always maintaining, our drainage is always maintaining. My hope is that in the plan, we make it very clear that we need to make sure that as we create new facilities or we remodel facilities, that we're always planning for the future of their maintenance and their upkeep. And I think that's a lot of the drive behind the sustainable landscaping and whatnot, is to make it a little bit easier. But I think for a long time, we haven't looked at the facilities as something that is forever going to need to be maintained. We fix something and we forget about it. And so that is a point well taken, that we need to make sure we make comment of facilities, not just our streets and drainage. Thank you for, I'm going to go make a note. Right? I'm going to
Write that down right now, but yes, any improvements, yes, the long-term goal would be that they're always ongoing. There's always upkeep involved, and that would be built into it. So not only do you have to have the funds to make it happen, you have to have the continual funds to maintain what you have created. Oh, are you?
Okay. Well, I think we're done then, huh?
I just want to get all the moving parts going and all these good ideas and you have to think about all that, but I'm glad that you're going, oh, there's too many moving parts. Keep thinking about how it's good work, not about one. So I mean.
Right, and that's part of the idea behind the priorities, is to give us a starting point. Yeah. Mhm.
It's hard to plan. It's hard to get right. Yeah, as part of the plan at the beginning, not, we want to do this, but we don't know how or how we're going to do it. We want to do this, and to do it, we have to have a full, well-rounded plan to make it happen and then continue the life cycle of it, so. Maintenance is forever, infrastructure is forever, streets are forever, drainage is forever, the maintenance
Right, but
always must continue.
we would expect, though, that as these projects are selected and we work with Mr. Rapley and his team to develop a scope and cost, that the maintenance at that time would be analyzed as well. Okay, how many guys are we going to need to cut this new piece of grass we got to take care of, all of that sort of thing. So, okay, well, any other comments, questions? Well, folks, we so much appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you very much. Next, let's see, as I mentioned, on December 10th, we're taking this to the Parks and Projects Commission, if you feel like sticking your head in. And then a week from tomorrow, we'll be taking it to council and hopefully getting some good remark, at least presenting to them, giving them the opportunity to think about it. I kind of doubt that they'll do much about it for another month or so. But anyway, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it very much, and we'll keep you posted. Thank you.